The $30,000 architectural model exploded against the marble floor like a crystal grenade, sending fragments of glass and metal skittering across Wesley Harrington's Italian leather shoes. Blood dripped from Darien Taylor's palm, where a shard had sliced deep, mixing with the scattered remains of months of meticulous work. "Clean it up, janitor." The CEO's voice echoed through Vertex Architecture's grand lobby, while 40 executives watched in stunned silence. What Wesley didn't know was that the bleeding man kneeling among the wreckage was the only person who could save his $80 million Dubai Tower project from catastrophic failure. Welcome to a story where genius wears a janitor's uniform and karma has a blueprint. Drop a comment about which city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story of justice travels. The morning had started like any other at Vertex Architecture, with Darien Taylor pushing his cleaning cart through the gleaming halls at 5:47 a.m., 3 hours before the first executives would arrive. The November rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 42nd floor, creating rivers of distortion that made the city below look like an impressionist painting drowning in gray. Darien paused at the main conference room, his reflection caught in the polished glass door, a lean black man in his early 30s, wearing the navy blue uniform that made him invisible to everyone who mattered in this building. His grandfather's brass compass weighed heavy in his pocket, a constant reminder of dreams deferred but not destroyed. "You could have been standing on the other side of this door," he whispered to his reflection, thinking of the MIT scholarship he'd lost, when his mother's cancer diagnosis forced him to choose between education and family. That was 8 years ago. 8 years of mopping floors while architectural visions danced behind his eyes. The conference room table held the centerpiece for today's presentation, a scale model of the Dubai International Trade Tower, all gleaming curves and impossible angles that defied conventional engineering. Darien studied it with the eye of someone who understood not just what he was seeing, but what was wrong with what he was seeing. "The foundation won't hold," he muttered, pulling out his worn notebook from the cleaning cart. His pencil moved across the page with practiced precision, sketching corrections to the load-bearing calculations that the city's most celebrated architects had somehow missed. "Shifting sands seismic zone 2B. They're using the wrong aggregate ratio. What the hell are you doing in here?" Xavier Chambers stood in the doorway, his Armani suit impeccable even at this ungodly hour. The firm's star architect had the kind of face that graced industry magazines: sharp cheekbones, perfectly styled blonde hair, and eyes that held the cold calculation of someone who'd stepped on countless others to reach his position. "Cleaning, sir," Darien replied quickly, closing his notebook and sliding it back into the cart. "I'll be finished in 5 minutes. Xavier's eyes narrowed as he noticed the pencil in Darien's hand. "Were you drawing something?" "Just making a note about cleaning supplies, Mr. Chambers." "Right." Xavier stepped into the room, his presence filling the space with an uncomfortable energy. He walked to the model, running his fingers along its edges possessively. "This beauty is going to make make Vertex the most sought-after firm in the international market. $80 million project, and the Sheikh specifically requested to see my work." Darien kept his expression neutral as he sprayed the windows, but his mind was screaming. The flaw in the foundation would cause a catastrophic failure within 2 years of completion, 3 if they were lucky. Lives would be lost. "But who would listen to a janitor? Make sure you don't touch the model," Xavier warned, heading for the door. "It's worth more than you'll make in a lifetime." After Xavier left, Darien finished cleaning, but not before taking several detailed photos of the model, with his phone zooming in on the structural points where he knew the problems lay. He'd studied this project for weeks, gathering discarded drafts from the trash, piecing together the full picture of what Vertex was building. It was his secret shame and his secret pride solving problems he'd never be allowed to officially solve. By 8:30 a.m., the office had transformed into its daily theater of ambition and anxiety. Assistants scurried between cubicles, architects hunched over drafting tables, and the sound of corporate importance filled every corner. Darien had learned to navigate this world like a ghost, timing his movements to avoid meaningful contact with anyone above his station. He was emptying the wastebasket in the Eastern Conference room when he heard voices that made him freeze. "The calculations don't add up, Xavier." It was Amara Wilson, the firm's only black architect, and from the tension in her voice, this wasn't the first time they'd had this conversation. "The soil composition reports from Dubai show the calculations are fine because I say they're fine." Xavier cut her off. "You've been here, 2 years? I've been leading projects for a decade. Stay in your lane, Wilson." My lane is making sure buildings don't collapse and kill people. Look at this stress point here." The sound of papers being swept off a table made Darien wince. "Clean that up on your way out," Xavier said coldly. "And remember, your performance review is next month. It would be a shame if your attitude problems affected your future here." Darien heard footsteps approaching and quickly resumed emptying the trash, keeping his head down as Xavier stormed past. A moment later, Amara emerged, her professional composure barely containing her frustration. She was brilliant. Darien had seen her work in the documents he'd salvaged, had recognized a kindred spirit in her attention to detail and innovative solutions. But she was fighting the same battle he'd given up on years ago, trying to be heard in a world that had already decided her place. Their eyes met for a brief moment. In that instant, Darien saw recognition, not of him as a person, but of shared understanding of dreams deferred and dignity maintained despite everything. Then the moment passed and she walked away, leaving him to clean up the papers Xavier had scattered. Among the documents was a stress analysis report that confirmed exactly what Darien had calculated. The foundation would fail. Amara knew it. But Xavier's ego and Wesley Harrington's greed would push the project forward anyway. The morning crawled toward noon, and the energy in the office shifted to barely contained panic. The Sheikh's representative was arriving at 2 p.m. for the preliminary presentation. Darien watched from his position in the supply closet as executives practiced their pitches, assistants triple-checked presentations, and Xavier held court like a general preparing for battle. Wesley Harrington himself emerged from his corner office at 12:30, his presence immediately commanding attention. The CEO of Vertex Architecture was a man who'd built his empire on 2 principles: take credit for everything and accept blame for nothing. At 55, he maintained himself with the desperate precision of someone who believed power could stop time. Silver hair, perfectly styled custom suits that cost more than most people's cars, and a voice that could switch from charming to cruel in the space of a heartbeat. "Where's my model?" Wesley barked, and assistants scattered like startled birds. "In the main conference room, Mr. Harrington," someone answered. "Xavier is doing final adjustments." "It better be perfect. The Sheikh's people don't give second chances, and neither do I." Darien was mopping the hallway outside the conference room when he heard the commotion begin. Xavier's voice pitched high with panic. "It was perfect this morning. Someone must have what?" Wesley's voice was deadly quiet, which anyone who knew him understood was far more dangerous than shouting. "The model. There's a crack in the main tower. It wasn't there an hour ago, I swear. You swear, you swear. We have the Sheikh's representative arriving in 90 minutes for a presentation that could define this firm's next decade, and you swear." Darien moved closer, peering through the glass door. The model's main tower indeed showed a hairline crack running through its center, a crack that hadn't been there this morning when he'd photographed it. His mind raced through possibilities: temperature change, structural weakness in the model itself, or someone sabotaged it, Xavier declared suddenly. "Someone who was in here this morning, someone who—" His eyes found Darien through the glass. "The janitor. He was in here this morning. I caught him drawing something." The door burst open, and Wesley's hand shot out, grabbing Darien by the collar and dragging him into the room. "You touched the model." "No, sir, I was just cleaning." "He's lying," Xavier interjected, desperate to shift blame. "I saw him with a pencil making notes. He probably damaged it out of jealousy." "Jealousy?" Wesley laughed, but there was no humor in it. What would a janitor have to be jealous about? He's nothing. Less than nothing. The room had filled with other executives drawn by the commotion like sharks to blood. Darien recognized the predatory excitement in their eyes. Someone was about to fall, and as long as it wasn't them, they would enjoy the show. "Please, Mr. Harrington," Darien said, keeping his voice steady, despite the grip on his collar. "I can explain. The crack isn't sabotage. It's structural failure in the model that mirrors a problem in the actual design." The slap came without warning, Wesley's hand connecting with Darien's face, hard enough to snap his head sideways. The room went silent, except for someone's shocked gasp, probably Amara, who'd just entered. "You think you can explain architecture to me?" Wesley's face was inches from Darien's now, his breath hot with rage and expensive coffee. "You clean toilets for a living. You push a mop. You are the dirt beneath the feet of the people who actually matter in this building." "Mr. Harrington," Amara stepped forward. "Perhaps we should focus on fixing the model, rather than—" "Did I ask for your opinion, Wilson?" Wesley didn't even look at her. His attention was entirely on Darien, on the pleasure of having someone completely under his power. "You know what? You're right about one thing, janitor. You can explain to the unemployment office why you were fired for destruction of company property." He released Darien's collar with a shove that sent him stumbling backward. "But first, you're going to clean up this mess." That's when Wesley picked up the model. Time seemed to slow as the CEO raised the $30,000 architectural model above his head. Darien saw Xavier's face go white, saw Amara's hand rise to her mouth, saw the other executives step back, as if distance could protect them from what was about to happen. "This is what I think of excuses," Wesley declared, and brought the model down with devastating force. The explosion of glass and metal was spectacular in its violence. The carefully crafted pieces scattered across the marble floor like shrapnel. The main tower splitting into 3 pieces, the delicate infrastructure work becoming nothing more than expensive debris. A piece of curved glass shot across the floor and sliced through Darien's palm as he instinctively raised his hand to protect his face. Blood immediately began to flow, dropping onto the white marble in crimson circles that looked almost artistic against the scattered remains of months of work. "Now," Wesley said, adjusting his tie as if nothing had happened, "clean it up." The silence that followed was suffocating. 40 people stood frozen watching as Darien slowly knelt, his blood mixing with the destroyed model. Not one person moved to help. Not one person spoke up. This was Vertex Architecture's culture distilled to its purest form, power exercised without conscience, talent wasted in favor of ego, and everyone too afraid or too complicit to change it. Darien began gathering the pieces with his good hand, his blood leaving smears across the marble. Each fragment he picked up represented hours of someone's work, someone's creativity destroyed in a moment of rage. He understood then that this wasn't really about the model, or even about him. This was Wesley Harrington showing everyone in the room what happened to those who complicated his narrative of success. "Sir," a nervous assistant appeared in the doorway. "The Sheikh's representative just called. They're 15 minutes out." The temperature in the room dropped another degree. Without a model, the presentation would be worthless. $80 million hung in the balance, and Wesley had just destroyed their only visual aid in a fit of pique. "Xavier." Wesley's voice was dangerously calm. "You have 15 minutes to explain to the Sheikh's representative why we're showing them drawings instead of a model. Make it good, or you'll be cleaning toilets next to your friend here." Xavier's face cycled through several shades of pale before landing on desperate determination. I'll tell them we're making final modifications based on their latest requirements, that we prioritized accuracy over display. You better sell it like your life depends on it, because your career certainly does." The executives began to file out, carefully stepping around Darien and the debris. Some avoided looking at him entirely, while others watched with the fascinated horror of people witnessing a car accident. Amara was the last to leave, and she paused near Darien, dropping a packet of tissues near his bleeding hand, before Wesley's sharp look sent her scurrying away. Alone now, except for a security guard Wesley had posted to watch him. Darien continued cleaning. His blood had stopped flowing, but his hand throbbed with each movement. As he gathered the pieces, his trained eye automatically cataloged them, understanding how they fit together, seeing the whole even in the destruction. And still, even broken, he could see the fundamental flaw that would bring the real building down. The Sheikh's representative arrived in a whirlwind of expensive cologne and entitled expectation. Through the conference room's glass walls, Darien watched the presentation unfold as he continued cleaning. He could see Xavier sweating through his suit, see Wesley's forced smile becoming more strained with each passing minute, see the representative's growing frustration with the lack of a physical model. "This is unacceptable." The representative's voice carried even through the closed door. "The Sheikh expects excellence, not excuses. You have 48 hours to present a complete proposal with a functioning model, or the contract goes to Steinberg Associates." The meeting ended in less than 20 minutes. As the representative departed, his assistant stopped in the lobby, looking at the bloodstains on the marble that Darien hadn't been able to completely remove. "What happened here?" the assistant asked the security guard. "Minor accident," the guard replied, clearly rehearsed. "Nothing to worry about." The assistant took a photo with his phone before leaving something about his expression, suggesting he wasn't entirely convinced. Wesley emerged from the conference room like a storm system, looking for a coast to devastate. His eyes found Darien immediately. "Still here, I told you to clean up and get out." "I'm almost finished, Mr. Harrington." "You're finished now. Security escort him out. HR will mail his final check." Darien stood slowly, his legs stiff from kneeling. In his pocket, his grandfather's compass seemed to burn against his leg, a reminder of everything he'd once hoped to be. He looked Wesley directly in the eye, something he'd never done in 3 years of working at Vertex. "The building will fall," he said quietly. "The Dubai Tower. Within 2 years of completion. The foundation won't hold in that soil with your current design." Wesley's face darkened to a shade of purple that couldn't be healthy for a man his age. "Get him out of here before I have him arrested for corporate espionage." As security led him away, Darien heard Wesley addressing the remaining staff. "Anyone who discusses what happened here today will be terminated immediately. We have 48 hours to save this deal, and I don't want any distractions." The elevator ride to the ground floor felt like a descent from one world to another. The security guard, a man named Marcus, whom Darien had shared lunch with, occasionally looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, D," Marcus said quietly. "This ain't right." "It's okay, Marcus. Just doing your job. Your hand needs stitches." Darien looked at the makeshift bandage he'd fashioned from the tissues Amara had dropped. Blood was already seeping through. "I'll take care of it." Marcus handed him a business card. "My cousin's a nurse at the free clinic on Riverside. Tell her I sent you. She'll take care of that hand off the books." It was a small kindness, but in that moment it meant everything. The rain had intensified while Darien was inside, turning the city into an impressionist's nightmare of blurred lights and reflected misery. He stood under the building's overhang, watching people hurry past with their umbrellas and purpose, and wondered what came next. 3 years of steady employment gone. His mother's medical bills were still mounting. His younger sister's college tuition was due next month, and all because he'd dared to point out a truth that could save lives. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Mr. Taylor, this is Sarah Chen from Channel 7 News. We received a tip about an incident at Vertex Architecture today. Would you be willing to comment?" Darien hung up without answering. The last thing he needed was to become a news story. Companies like Vertex had lawyers who could destroy what little he had left. But as he walked through the rain toward the free clinic, his mind wouldn't stop working on the problem. The Dubai Tower would fall. People would die. And he had the knowledge to prevent it, trapped in a mind that no one would listen to because it came wrapped in a janitor's uniform. At the clinic, Marcus's cousin Denise stitched his hand with practiced efficiency, while tisking at the depth of the cut. "You should file for workers' comp," she said. "This happened at work, right?" "It's complicated." She gave him a look that said she'd heard that before. It always is when it comes to standing up to power. But sometimes complicated is necessary. As she worked, Darien's phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. "I know you were right about the foundation. Meet me at the coffee shop on 3rd Street tomorrow at 7 a.m. A.W. Amara Wilson, the only other person at Vertex who understood what was at stake. That night, Darien sat in his small apartment, his bandaged hand throbbing as he spread out all the photographs and notes he'd collected about the Dubai Tower project. By the light of his grandfather's old drafting lamp, one of the few things he'd kept from the old man's estate, he began to work. If Vertex wouldn't listen to a janitor, maybe they'd listen to mathematics. Using his grandfather's compass and a set of drafting tools that had been gathering dust for 3 years, Darien began to create something that had been building in his mind since the first time he'd seen the flawed plans. He drew through the night, his injured hand cramping around the pencil, but his mind clearer than it had been in years. Every line was precise, every calculation double-checked. This wasn't just about fixing the Dubai Tower anymore. This was about proving that talent didn't care about titles, that knowledge couldn't be suppressed by corporate hierarchy, that truth had a way of surfacing, no matter how deep you tried to bury it. As dawn light crept through his window, Darien looked at what he'd created. A complete redesign of the Dubai Tower's foundation, elegant in its simplicity, revolutionary in its approach to the unique challenges of the building site. It would cost 15% less than the current design and be 3 times as stable. He thought about his grandfather, who'd designed churches and community centers in the Jim Crow South, never receiving credit, but always finding a way to build something beautiful despite the obstacles. "They can take your credit," the old man used to say, "but they can't take your knowledge, and knowledge properly applied is power." Darien carefully rolled up his drawings and placed them in a waterproof tube. He had no idea what Amara wanted or whether she could help, but for the first time in 3 years, he felt like he was moving toward something instead of just surviving. The rain had stopped during the night, and morning brought one of those crystalline November days that made the city look like it had been washed clean. Darien arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early, choosing a corner booth where he could see both the entrance and the exit habits formed from 3 years of navigating hostile territory. Amara arrived exactly at 7, looking like she hadn't slept either. She slid into the booth across from him, her eyes immediately going to his bandaged hand. "How bad is it?" "8 stitches. I've had worse." She laughed bitterly. "I haven't. In all my years of fighting to be heard in that place, I've never seen anything like what happened yesterday. It wasn't about me. Wesley needed a target, and I was convenient." "No." Amara leaned forward, her voice intense. "It was about you being right. Xavier knew you were right. Hell, Wesley probably knew it too. But admitting a janitor understood something they didn't. That would crack the whole facade." She pulled out a tablet, swiping to bring up a series of documents. "I've been documenting everything for months. Every corner cut, every safety violation ignored, every time Xavier stamped his name on work other people did. But after yesterday, I realized documentation isn't enough. The system is designed to protect itself." "Then why did you want to meet?" Amara looked him directly in the eye. "Because the Sheikh's representative is giving them 48 hours, and I know for a fact that Xavier has no idea how to fix the foundation problem. He's been up all night calling in favors, trying to find someone who can solve it without admitting he can't. But you can solve it, can't you?" Instead of answering, Darien pulled out the tube containing his drawings and spread them on the table. Amara's eyes widened as she took in the elegance of his solution, her trained eye recognizing immediately what he'd accomplished. This is brilliant. It's not just fixing the problem, it's reimagining the entire approach." She looked up at him. "Where did you train?" MIT for 2 years, before life intervened. The rest I learned from my grandfather and from 3 years of studying every document that went through Vertex's trash. You've been shadow architecting from the janitor's closet. Something like that. Amara was quiet for a long moment, studying the drawings. Then she said something that surprised him. I'm done with Vertex. Win or lose this Dubai deal, I'm out. But before I go, I want to do one thing right. I want to make sure this building doesn't kill people. They'll never accept a solution from me. A smile played at the corners of her mouth. No, but they might accept it from Xavier when he's desperate enough. And in about 6 hours, he's going to be very, very desperate. She pulled out her phone and showed him a message. It was from Xavier, sent at 3 a.m. Wilson, need your help. We'll make it worth your while. My office, 1 p.m. He's already cycling through every architect he's ever screwed over, begging for help, Amara said. By this afternoon, he'll be willing to claim any solution as his own. And you want to just give him my design? No, I want to use it as bait. She leaned back, and Darien saw the strategic mind that had survived 2 years at Vertex, despite everything working against her. The Sheikh's representative took photos of the blood on the marble. My contact at Channel 7 has been investigating Vertex's labor practices for months. And now we have a solution that could save the project, but only if certain conditions are met. What kind of conditions? The kind that ensure the real architect gets credit. The kind that expose what really happens behind those glass doors. The kind that makes Wesley Harrington understand that talent isn't about titles. Darien looked at his bandaged hand, then at the drawings that represented not just a solution to an engineering problem, but years of suppressed potential. It's dangerous. They have lawyers' connections, the ability to destroy both our careers, not that I have much of one left. They've already destroyed our careers. They did it the day they decided we were less than them because of who we are rather than what we can do. The question is whether we go quietly or we make some noise on the way out. Outside the coffee shop, the city was waking up properly now, streams of people heading to jobs where they might be valued or ignored, promoted or overlooked, seen or invisible. Darien thought about all the other janitors and security guards and maintenance workers who might have revolutionary ideas trapped behind uniforms that marked them as unimportant. What do you need me to do? He asked. Amara's smile was the first genuinely happy expression he'd seen from her. First, we need to make copies of everything, your drawings, my documentation, all of it. Then, we need to get you a suit. A suit? You're going to be in that building one more time, Mr. Taylor, but this time you won't be pushing a mop. As they left the coffee shop together, Darien felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of bonds he'd placed on himself 3 years ago, when he'd accepted that survival was more important than dreams. His grandfather's compass seemed lighter in his pocket, less like a weight, and more like a guide. The city stretched before them, all glass and steel and possibility. Somewhere in one of those towers, Wesley Harrington and Xavier Chambers were scrambling to save a deal that would cement their reputations. They had no idea that their solution was walking the streets they'd never deigned to travel, carried by people they'd never bothered to see. The mini-climax was building like pressure in a foundation, invisible to those who didn't know where to look, but inevitable in its conclusion. In 48 hours, the Sheikh would return for answers. And Darien Taylor, 3-year veteran janitor of Vertex Architecture, would make sure they got more truth than they'd bargained for. The bloodstains on the marble might have been cleaned, but some things once broken revealed truths that no amount of polish could hide. And sometimes, just sometimes, that breaking was the first step toward building something better. The suit felt like armor made of lies. Darien stood in the fitting room of a discount menswear store staring at his reflection, while Amara adjusted the collar of a charcoal gray jacket that had seen better days, but would pass inspection from a distance. 24 hours had passed since their coffee shop meeting, and in that time, they'd assembled something that felt dangerously close to hope. Stop fidgeting, Amara said, smoothing the shoulders. You look like you belong. That's what I'm afraid of. He tugged at the tie, a deep blue silk that Amara had pulled from her own collection. Looking like them. You're nothing like them. That's why this is going to work. She stepped back, evaluating. Xavier's meeting is in 3 hours. He's already called me 4 times this morning, each message more desperate than the last. Through the fitting room door, Darien could hear the store's television broadcasting the noon news. A familiar voice made them both freeze. Questions tonight about safety standards at one of the city's premier architecture firms. Sources inside Vertex Architecture report that concerns about the structural integrity of an $80 million project were ignored, leading to a violent confrontation that left at least one employee injured. Amara's phone buzzed immediately. She looked at the screen and smiled grimly. Wesley's damage control team is in overdrive. They're claiming it's a disgruntled former employee spreading lies. She showed him the screen, a press release from Vertex, categorically denying any safety concerns with the Dubai Tower project. Former employee, Darien said bitterly. They can't even acknowledge I existed. Oh, they're about to acknowledge a lot more than that. Amara pulled out a slim folder containing his redesigned foundation plans, now transferred to official Vertex letterhead, with strategic modifications. The beauty of this is that Xavier won't even understand what he's looking at. He'll see a solution, grab it like a lifeline, and present it without realizing what we've embedded in the documentation. The watermarks. Microscopic but legally binding. Your initials, the date you created it, and a digital signature that ties back to your MIT student ID. Hidden in plain sight, waiting for anyone who knows where to look. They'd spent the previous evening at a 24-hour copy shop creating multiple versions of the plans. One set for Xavier, one for Amara's contact at the news station, one for the Sheikh's representative, and one locked in a safety deposit box that Amara had opened that morning. Insurance, she called it. Darien thought of it as evidence for a crime that hadn't been committed yet. Back at his apartment, they'd also discovered something else in Darien's collection of salvaged documents. Among the papers he'd rescued from the trash over the years was an early memo about the Dubai project, one that explicitly outlined the foundation concerns and recommended a comprehensive soil analysis. It was dated 6 months ago and signed by Amara Wilson. At the bottom, in Wesley's distinctive handwriting, were 2 words, "Ignore this." He knew, Darien had said, staring at the memo. He knew from the beginning. They always know, Amara replied. They just believe that money and power can override physics. Now dressed in his borrowed suit with his grandfather's compass tucked in the inner pocket, Darien felt like he was preparing for war. The bandage on his hand had been replaced with a smaller one that barely showed beneath the cuff, but the stitches pulled with every movement, a constant reminder of yesterday's humiliation. "Remember," Amara said as they left the store. "You're not Darien Taylor today. You're David Thompson, independent consultant from Chicago. Your credentials are real. I called in a favor from a friend at IIT who's creating a digital footprint as we speak. If anyone checks, you'll exist. And if someone recognizes me, then we improvise. But think about it, how many of those executives really looked at you in 3 years? To them, you were just part of the furniture." She was right, and that truth stung more than his injured hand. He'd been invisible for so long that visibility itself felt like a disguise. They parted ways 2 blocks from Vertex Amara, heading to the main entrance, while Darien circled to the service entrance he knew so well. Marcus was on duty, and his eyes widened when he saw Darien. What are you doing here, man? And dressed like I matter." Darien slipped Marcus a 20. "I need 5 minutes. You never saw me." Marcus pocketed the bill, but looked worried. "Whatever you're planning, be careful. Wesley's had security reviewing footage all morning looking for something. And there's been talk." "What kind of talk?" "The kind that suggests this Dubai thing is bigger than just one project. Word is, if this deal falls through, Vertex might not survive. They've over-leveraged everything on international expansion." This was news to Darien, but it explained Wesley's volcanic reaction to the model breaking. The entire company was balanced on the edge of this one project. Marcus buzzed him through, and Darien walked the familiar service corridors with unfamiliar purpose. He could hear the panic bleeding through the walls, raised voices, hurried footsteps, the particular quality of desperation that infected corporate spaces when failure loomed. He took the service elevator to the 39th floor, 3 below the executive level. From here, he could access the internal stairs that would bring him to Xavier's office from an unexpected direction. As he climbed, his phone vibrated with a text from Amara. "He's melting down. Perfect timing." Through the stairwell door's narrow window, Darien could see Xavier's corner office. The man was pacing, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his tie loosened. 3 other architects sat around his conference table, all looking equally desperate. Papers covered every surface, and a half-constructed model, clearly a rush job, sat abandoned in the corner. Darien waited until the other architects left, each shaking their heads before making his move. He knocked on Xavier's door with the confidence of someone who belonged there. "What?" Xavier barked, not looking up from the papers he was shuffling. "If you don't have a solution, I don't have time." "I have a solution." Xavier's head snapped up, and for a moment Darien thought he'd been recognized. But Xavier's eyes showed only desperate hope, not recognition. The suit, the posture, the context, everything had transformed the invisible janitor into someone worth seeing. "Who are you?" "David Thompson, structural specialist from Chicago. Amara Wilson suggested you might need assistance." "Wilson?" "That bit." Xavier caught himself. "She said she didn't have anything." "She doesn't, I do." Darien set his folder on the desk, taking his time making Xavier wait. "But I don't work for free, and I don't work for credit thieves." Xavier's face flushed. "I don't know what you've heard." "I've heard enough. I've also heard that you have approximately 19 hours before the Sheikh's representative returns, and your current solution wouldn't support a dollhouse, much less an 80-story tower." He opened the folder, revealing just the first page of his redesign. Xavier's eyes widened as he absorbed what he was seeing. Elegant solutions to problems he probably didn't fully understand he had. "This is... How did you... Trade secrets. The question is, do you want the rest of it?" Xavier reached for the folder, but Darien pulled it back. "Terms first." "Whatever you want. Money, credit, a position here." "I don't want to work here. God knows I don't want that." The vehemence in his voice was real, and Xavier actually stepped back. "I want $50,000 transferred to this account." He slid over a paper with banking information for a trust Amara had helped him set up, one that would funnel the money to his mother's medical fund and his sister's tuition. "And I want a written acknowledgement that this solution came from an external consultant." "Fine, yes, whatever." Xavier was practically salivating over the partial diagram he could see. "Just give me the plans." "Money first." Xavier didn't hesitate. Within minutes, he'd initiated the transfer from his personal account. Darien watched the confirmation appear on his phone, feeling a mix of satisfaction and disgust. 3 years of cleaning this man's office, and now he was buying Darien's expertise without knowing it. "Now," Xavier said, "the plans." Darien handed over the folder, watching as Xavier's eyes devoured the contents. The man wasn't stupid, just lazy and entitled. He could recognize brilliance even if he couldn't create it. "This is perfect. It's absolutely perfect. How did you know about the soil composition issue?" "I did my research. Something you might have tried." Xavier was too excited to be insulted. He was already pulling out his phone, texting what Darien assumed was the fabrication team. "We can have a new model built by morning. The presentation will be flawless." "One more thing," Darien said, moving toward the door. "The design has a signature element, a specific load-bearing innovation that's never been used before. If anyone asks where it came from, you'd better have a good answer." "What kind of innovation?" Darien smiled for the first time. "You'll figure it out. You're the star architect after all. As he left Xavier's office, he passed Wesley in the hallway. The CEO's eyes swept over him without a flicker of recognition, focused entirely on his phone, where presumably more damage control was being coordinated. The man who'd made Darien bleed just yesterday couldn't see him when he wore a different uniform. The next few hours moved like a carefully choreographed dance. Amara met with the fabrication team, subtly ensuring they understood the new plans while making it seem like Xavier's idea. Darien, still in his David Thompson persona, made strategic appearances in the building, being seen by just enough people to establish his presence as a consultant. At 4 p.m., Amara's news contact arrived for a routine follow-up on the earlier story. The reporter Sarah Chen was young but sharp, and her questions to Wesley's PR team were precisely targeted to create maximum discomfort without revealing how much she actually knew. Can you confirm that an employee was injured on the premises yesterday? No comment on personnel matters. Was this injury related to the Dubai Tower project? The Dubai Tower project is proceeding on schedule. Our sources suggest there are structural concerns. Your sources are mistaken. We have the finest architects in the city working on this project. Darien watched the interview from a monitor in the security office, Marcus having conveniently needed a bathroom break. Sarah Chen was good, but she was saving her best ammunition for later. She had photos of the blood on the marble, the destroyed model, and something else, security footage from the lobby that Marcus had provided showing Darien being escorted out while bleeding. The mini-climax hit at 6 p.m. when Xavier presented the revised plans to Wesley and the senior partners. Darien and Amara watched from different vantage points, him from an empty office, where he was supposedly reviewing contracts, her from her desk, where she was openly packing her belongings into boxes. "Gentlemen," Xavier announced with restored confidence, "I've solved our problem." The presentation was flawless, Darien had to admit. Xavier had absorbed enough of the surface details to sound competent, even if he didn't truly understand the underlying engineering. The senior partners nodded along, relief visible on their faces, as Xavier walked them through the solution. "This is exceptional work, Xavier," Wesley said, though his tone suggested suspicion. "How did you manage this in less than 24 hours? "I brought in a consultant," Xavier replied smoothly. "Sometimes fresh eyes see solutions we miss." "A consultant who?" "David Thompson from Chicago, structural specialist. He's actually in the building if you'd like to meet him." Wesley's eyes narrowed. "Bring him in." This was the moment Darien had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. He walked into the conference room with affected confidence, extending his hand to Wesley without a tremor. "Mr. Harrington, pleasure to meet you." Wesley shook his hand, and Darien saw the exact moment a flicker of something not quite recognition but unease pass through the CEO's eyes. But the context was too strong. The suit, the confidence, Xavier's endorsement, all of it overwrote whatever instinct was telling Wesley something was wrong. "Mr. Thompson, this is impressive work. Where did you train?" "MIT," Darien replied truthfully. "Though I didn't finish. Family obligations." "And you came up with this solution in one day." "The solution was always there. It just needed someone willing to see it." Wesley studied him for a long moment, and Darien felt sweat gathering at the base of his spine. Then the CEO turned back to Xavier. "Good work bringing him in. Make sure he signs a comprehensive NDA before he leaves." And just like that, Darien was dismissed. He walked out of the conference room, past the spot where he'd knelt in his own blood just yesterday, and felt a surge of something that might have been triumph or might have been rage. As night fell over the city, the fabrication team worked frantically to create the new model based on Darien's plans. Xavier supervised with the anxiety of a man who knew he was taking credit for something he didn't understand. Amara finished packing her desk, ignored by colleagues who were too focused on the crisis to wonder why she was leaving. And in his apartment, Darien sat with his grandfather's compass and original sketches, waiting for tomorrow's presentation like a chess player who'd already calculated the endgame but still had to watch the pieces move. The twist came at 10 p.m., delivered via a phone call from an unknown number. "Mr. Taylor." The voice was accented, Middle Eastern refined. "This is Ahmed Hassan, assistant to Sheikh al-Rashid. We need to discuss tomorrow's presentation." Darien's blood chilled. "I think you have the wrong number." "I don't think so. You see, we have very good investigators, and when blood appears on marble in a building we're about to invest $80 million in, we investigate. We know who you are, what happened yesterday, and we suspect we know what you're planning tomorrow." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please, Mr. Taylor, we're not calling to stop you. We're calling because the Sheikh values truth above all else, and we believe you might be the only person willing to provide it. The question is whether you're prepared for what will happen when you do." The line went dead, leaving Darien staring at his phone. The game had just changed, and he wasn't sure anymore who was playing whom. He immediately called Amara. "They know," he said without preamble. "Who knows? The Sheikh's people, they know everything." There was a long pause. Then Amara laughed, surprising him. "Good," she said. "That means tomorrow is going to be even more interesting than we planned." Outside his window, the city sparkled with lights from thousands of offices, where people were working late, chasing dreams or deadlines, or both. Tomorrow, in one of those gleaming towers, a confrontation 3 years in the making would finally unfold. The invisible janitor would become visible, the silent architect would speak, and the foundation of more than just a building would be tested. Darien picked up his grandfather's compass, feeling its familiar weight. "They can take your credit," the old man had said, "but they can't take your knowledge." Tomorrow, he would find out if knowledge really was power, or if power would do what it always did, protect itself at any cost. The fabrication team worked through the night, their 3D printers and laser cutters humming, as they brought Darien's vision into physical form. Xavier had fallen asleep at his desk, surrounded by papers he didn't fully understand, dreaming perhaps of glory that wasn't his to claim. Wesley Harrington stood at his office window looking out at the city and calculating damage control strategies, unaware that the damage was already spreading beneath the surface, like cracks in a faulty foundation. And somewhere in between all of them, the truth waited patiently to be revealed, as truth always does, needing only the right moment and the right pressure to break through. The mini-climax built through the night like a storm system gathering strength, and by dawn, when the new model stood complete in Vertex's conference room, gleaming and perfect, and built on stolen genius, everyone involved knew that this day would change everything. They just didn't know how much. The morning arrived wrapped in fog that turned the city's skyscrapers into ghosts of themselves, their tops disappearing into gray nothing. Darien stood in the kitchen of a hotel room that Amara had insisted on booking for him, watching coffee drip into a cup while his phone buzzed with updates. The Sheikh's delegation would arrive at Vertex in 3 hours. The new model built from his stolen plans was already in place. And somewhere in the building's service corridors, a catering uniform hung waiting with his name, his real name sewn into the collar by Amara's own hands the night before. "You're insane for doing this," Amara had said while stitching. "You could just let them fail on their own." "They won't fail," Darien had replied. "Xavier will present my work, the Sheikh will approve it, the building will be built correctly, and lives will be saved. But I'll still be invisible. So this is about recognition. This is about truth. There's a difference." Now dressed in the catering uniform that felt more honest than yesterday's borrowed suit, Darien made his way to Vertex through service entrances he knew better than most executives knew their own offices. The building was electric with nervous energy. Security had been tripled, every surface gleamed with fresh polish, and Wesley Harrington's voice could be heard barking orders from 3 floors away. Marcus wasn't at his usual post. Instead, a younger guard Darien didn't recognize checked his fabricated catering company ID without really looking at his face. The invisibility of service workers was about to become his greatest weapon. In the service elevator, Darien's phone vibrated. A message from Ahmed Hassan, The Sheikh appreciates truth served at the right temperature. East Conference Room, 10:47 a.m. precisely. It was 9:30 now. Darien made his way to the catering staging area, where a legitimate catering crew was preparing for the presentation. He blended in seamlessly muscle memory from 3 years taking over as he arranged glasses, checked coffee urns, did all the things that made him invisible to the people who mattered. "You there?" a catering supervisor called out. "Take this tray to the East Conference Room. They want it set up before the clients arrive." Darien took the tray of water glasses, his bandaged hand hidden under white service gloves, and walked through hallways he'd cleaned countless times. Through the glass walls, he could see the main conference room where the presentation would happen. The new model sat at the center of the massive table, spotlit like a piece of art. It was beautiful, he had to admit. His design made physical, even if his name was nowhere on it. Xavier stood beside it, rehearsing his presentation to a group of junior architects who nodded at appropriate intervals. The man had memorized enough technical jargon to sound competent, though Darien noticed he kept glancing at note cards hidden in his palm. "The innovation here," Xavier was saying, "is in the distribution of load-bearing elements through what I call the cascade system." What I call. The words burned, but Darien kept walking. The East Conference Room was smaller, more intimate, with a view of the city that was currently obscured by fog. He arranged the glasses, checked his phone. 10:15 a.m. Wesley entered the main conference room with his senior staff, all of them dressed in their most expensive suits, their faces masks of confident competence that didn't quite hide the fear underneath. Vertex's survival depended on the next 2 hours. "Gentlemen," Wesley addressed his team, his voice carrying through the glass walls. "This is our Apollo moment. Everything we've built over 20 years comes down to this presentation. I want perfect execution, no surprises." If only he knew, Darien thought, positioning himself where he could observe both conference rooms. The Sheikh's delegation would arrive in the main conference room first, but Ahmad Hassan's message suggested something else would happen in the East Room. A side meeting, perhaps. A moment of truth served at exactly the right temperature. At 10:35, the Sheikh's motorcade arrived. Darien watched from a service corridor window as 3 black SUVs disgorged a dozen people in a mix of traditional Middle Eastern dress and Western business suits. Sheikh al-Rashid himself was immediately recognizable, a man in his 60s, with the bearing of someone who'd never had to raise his voice to be heard. The delegation swept into Vertex's lobby like visiting royalty, which in the world of architecture and money, they essentially were. Wesley met them with obsequious deference that would have been funny if it wasn't so desperate. "Your Excellency, welcome back to Vertex. We're excited to show you how we've addressed your concerns." The Sheikh nodded but said nothing, his dark eyes taking in everything: the nervous staff, the over-polished surfaces, and yes, the spot on the marble where Darien's blood had been just 2 days ago. Despite the cleaning, there was still a faint discoloration if you knew where to look. They proceeded to the main conference room, but Ahmad Hassan lingered, speaking quietly to 2 men in traditional dress. Then, instead of following the main group, they turned toward the East Conference Room. Darien checked his phone. 10:46 a.m. He entered the East Conference Room with a fresh tray of coffee at exactly 10:47, finding Ahmad Hassan and the 2 other men already seated. Ahmad was younger than his voice had suggested, perhaps 40, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "Ah," Ahmad said in perfect English. "Right on time. Please close the door and join us." Darien set down the tray carefully. "I'm just catering staff, sir." "No, Mr. Taylor, you're not. Please sit. We have exactly 12 minutes before the Sheikh will require our presence, and there are things you need to understand." The 2 other men watched him with expressions that gave away nothing. Darien sat, pulling off the service gloves to reveal his bandaged hand. "The Sheikh," Ahmad began, "has a particular interest in truth. He built his fortune not on oil, as many assume, but on recognizing talent regardless of where it comes from. His grandfather was a pearl diver who became a merchant. His father was a merchant who became a developer. The Sheikh himself started as a construction worker who educated himself at night school. Why are you telling me this? Because he despises nothing more than stolen valor. When we investigated the incident here 2 days ago, we found something interesting. Security footage shows a janitor being escorted out while injured. But more interesting was what our technical team found when they examined the original model's remains. One of the other men spoke for the first time, his accent thicker than Ahmad's. Fingerprints on the internal structural elements. Fingerprints that match a janitor who's been here 3 years, not an executive who claimed to design them. Darien's heart was racing, but he kept his face neutral. Lots of people touch the models. Not the internal load-bearing calculations written in pencil on the underside of the base, written in a hand that matches notebooks we found in the trash notebooks filled with architectural innovations that would make any firm millions. They knew. They knew everything. Ahmed leaned forward. The Sheikh wants to invest in this building, Mr. Taylor. But he wants to invest in the right people. The question is whether you're prepared to stand up in that room and claim what's yours. They'll destroy me. Wesley has lawyers. Wesley has debt, the third man interrupted. Vertex is 3 months from bankruptcy if this deal doesn't go through. The Sheikh knows this. Wesley knows we know. The power dynamics are not what they appear. Through the glass wall, Darien could see the main presentation beginning. Xavier stood beside the model pointer in hand, his confidence restored by stolen brilliance. Wesley watched with predatory satisfaction, believing his empire saved. What exactly are you asking me to do? Darien asked. Ahmad smiled. We're asking you to be yourself, Mr. Taylor, at the moment when truth would have maximum impact. The Sheikh will ask specific questions about the innovation in the design. Mr. Chambers will not be able to answer them because he doesn't understand them. That's when you enter. As a janitor, as yourself, the rest will follow. Ahmad stood, and the others followed. 12 minutes are up. The Sheikh will now require his technical advisors. You should return to your duties but stay close. When you hear the Sheikh ask about seismic reinforcement in Sector 7, that's your moment. They left Darien alone in the East Conference Room, staring at his reflection in the polished table. The man looking back at him wore a catering uniform, but his eyes held something that hadn't been there 3 days ago: possibility. The presentation in the main conference room was reaching its crescendo. Darien positioned himself just outside, ostensibly arranging coffee service, but actually watching Xavier fumble through explanations he didn't understand. The model was magnificent, every line of it singing with the elegance of Darien's solution. But Xavier was murdering the presentation with his ignorance. The cascade system, Xavier was saying, reading from his cards, redistributes weight through a series of integrated supports that what Mr. Chambers. The Sheikh spoke for the first time, his voice calm, but carrying an edge that made everyone in the room tense. Please explain the mathematical principle behind your cascade system. Xavier's face went pale. Well, it's based on advanced calculus that accounts for which specific calculations. Show me. This was spiraling faster than Ahmad had predicted. Xavier looked desperately at Wesley, who stepped forward with corporate smoothness. Your Excellency, perhaps we could focus on the practical applications rather than no. The Sheikh's word cut through Wesley's attempted deflection. I'm investing $80 million in a building that will bear my name. I want to understand the innovation that Mr. Chambers claims to have developed. Specifically, I want to know about the seismic reinforcement in Sector 7. There it was, the moment Ahmad had promised. Darien's hand was on the door handle before he fully realized he was moving. He entered the conference room carrying a coffee pot, every eye turning to him with the automatic dismissal reserved for service staff. Except the Sheikh's eyes. They watched him with intent focus. Sir, Darien said quietly to Xavier, who was sweating through his suit. You have the calculations reversed. What? Xavier spun toward him. Who are you? Get out. The seismic reinforcement in Sector 7 requires a coefficient of 3.7, not 7.3. You've inverted it. If built that way, the building would collapse within 18 months. The room went absolutely silent. Wesley's face was cycling through colors like a broken traffic light. "Security," Wesley barked, but the Sheikh raised a hand. "Let him speak. You seem to know about this design, young man." Darien set down the coffee pot, his movements deliberate. He pulled off the service gloves, revealing his bandaged hand, and walked to the model. His fingers traced the structural elements with the intimacy of a creator touching their creation. "I know about it because I designed it. 3 nights ago in my apartment using techniques my grandfather taught me, and mathematics I learned at MIT before I had to drop out. The cascade system isn't just about weight distribution, it's about harmonic resonance, about making the building sing in harmony with the forces acting upon it, rather than fighting against them." "You're a janitor," Xavier sputtered. "You're nobody. You clean toilets." "I'm also the person who saved your career yesterday, when you paid me $50,000 for these plans." Darien pulled out his phone showing the transaction. "Though you knew me as David Thompson then." Wesley's hands were gripping the table so hard his knuckles were white. "This is corporate espionage. This man is a fraud." "No!" Amara's voice came from the doorway where she'd been waiting. She entered carrying a box of documents. "This man is a genius you've been mopping your floors with for 3 years while you ignored safety concerns that could have killed thousands." She set the box on the table, pulling out document after document. Memos about foundation problems dismissed, safety concerns ignored. And here, she pulled out a photograph that made everyone lean forward. Mr. Taylor's original sketches, dated and notarized 3 days ago, before Mr. Chambers claims to have created the cascade system. The Sheikh's technical advisors were examining the documents, their expressions growing more serious with each page. Ahmad whispered something in the Sheikh's ear, and the older man nodded slowly. "Mr. Chambers," the Sheikh said quietly, "can you explain the mathematical principle I asked about?" Xavier looked like a man standing before a firing squad. I need to review my notes." "Mr. Taylor, can you explain it?" Darien didn't need notes. The mathematics flowed from him like poetry, his hands sketching invisible calculations in the air as he explained not just how the system worked, but why it worked, the philosophical elegance behind the engineering. He talked about wind patterns, about the specific soil composition of the Dubai site, about innovations that went beyond fixing problems to reimagining what architecture could be. When he finished, the room was silent, except for the soft sound of Wesley's breathing, which had become labored and harsh. "You had this man cleaning your floors," the Sheikh said to Wesley, his voice containing wonder and disgust in equal measure. "This mind, this talent, and you had him cleaning floors." "He's just a janitor," Wesley said weakly. "He has no credentials, no degree." "Neither did I when I started," the Sheikh replied. "Neither did my father. Credentials are paper. Talent is truth." The twist came from an unexpected source. One of the junior architects who'd been silent in the corner suddenly stood up. "I have something to say." It was James Morrison, someone Darien had barely noticed in 3 years. Mr. Taylor isn't the only one. Half the innovations that come out of this firm come from people Xavier and Mr. Harrington ignore or abuse. The Cleveland project last year. That was designed by an intern who quit after Xavier took credit. The Bangkok Tower. The breakthrough came from a suggestion by the night security guard who'd been a structural engineer in Thailand before immigrating. It was like a dam breaking. Other voices joined in, years of suppressed truth flooding out. The room became chaos, accusations and revelations flying, while Wesley's empire crumbled in real time. Through it all, the Sheikh watched with calm assessment. Finally, he stood, and silence fell. "Mr. Taylor," he said formally, "I would like to hire you as the lead architect on the Dubai International Trade Tower project." "He doesn't work for you." Wesley snarled, desperation making him reckless. "He works for me. He signed contracts. Actually, Darien said quietly. You fired me 2 days ago. Remember, security escorted me out. I have witnesses. Then he violated his NDA by designing competing. I designed these solutions as a private citizen on my own time, using no Vertex resources. Darien interrupted. My contract, which I've had 3 years to memorize, is very clear about intellectual property rights. Anything I create outside of work hours using my own resources belongs to me. Amara smiled. I helped him review the legal language. It's ironclad. Wesley's face had gone beyond purple to a shade that didn't have a name. You planned this, all of you. This is conspiracy. This is consequence, the Sheikh said. You had gold and treated it as dirt. Now someone else will benefit from what you discarded. The mini-climax hit when Wesley lunged across the table at Darien, his composure finally snapping completely. You worthless piece of... Security, the real security, intervened, but not before Wesley's hands had knocked over the model, sending it crashing to the floor in an echo of what had happened 3 days ago. But this time, Darien didn't kneel to clean it up. He stood tall, watching his former boss being restrained by the very guards who'd once escorted him out. The difference between us, Mr. Harrington, Darien said quietly, is that I can build another model. You can't build another reputation. The Sheikh's delegation was already moving their decision made. Ahmed handed Darien a business card with numbers on it that made his eyes widen. This is your consulting fee for the Dubai project, Mr. Taylor. We'll also cover your completion of your MIT degree and any other education you wish to pursue. Talent like yours should be nurtured, not neglected. Xavier had sunk into a chair, his face in his hands. The other executives were fleeing like rats from a sinking ship. Only Amara remained standing beside Darien as they watched an empire fall. But the true climax was still coming. Sarah Chen from Channel 7 had been live streaming from the lobby, having been tipped off by Amara about the timing. The confrontation, the revelation. Wesley's assault, all of it, was already spreading across social media with the hashtag #TheRealArchitect. Darien's phone was exploding with notifications. Job offers, interview requests, messages from old MIT classmates who'd seen the stream. 3 years of invisibility had ended in the most visible way possible. Mr. Taylor, the Sheikh said as his delegation prepared to leave. There's one more thing. The Dubai Tower is just the beginning. I'm planning a series of buildings around the world, each one pushing the boundaries of what's possible. I want you to lead the design team, not as an employee, but as a partner. I don't even have my degree, Darien said, still stunned. You have something better. You have vision. The degree is just paperwork we'll handle. Your grandfather would be proud. As the Sheikh's delegation left, Darien found himself standing in the ruins of Vertex's conference room. Broken model pieces scattered the floor. Wesley was being escorted out by security. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, and Xavier was clearing his desk under supervision. You know what's funny, Amara said, picking up a piece of the broken model. This is exactly where we started 3 days ago. Broken pieces on expensive marble. Except now everyone knows who really builds, and who just takes credit, Darien replied. Through the conference room windows, the fog was lifting, revealing the city in sharp clarity. Somewhere out there in buildings just like this one, other invisible talents were pushing mops and emptying trash while dreaming of bigger things. Darien thought about James Morrison's revelation, about all the innovations that came from unexpected sources. His phone rang. It was his mother. Baby, what's happening? Your sister just called and said you're all over the news. Mom, I need to tell you something. Remember how I said I'd figure out a way to pay for your treatment and Keisha's tuition? Darien, what did you do? I told the truth, Mom. Finally told the truth. As he talked to his mother, Darien walked through Vertex's halls one last time. But now, instead of being invisible, everyone saw him. Some with admiration, some with fear, some with the calculating look of people reconsidering their assumptions. Marcus appeared from nowhere, grinning widely. D-man, that was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Wesley getting dragged out by security, I'm framing that mental picture. Thanks for your help, Marcus, with the footage and everything. Always knew you were meant for more than pushing that cart. Question is, what now? Darien looked at his grandfather's compass, which he'd pulled from his pocket. The needle pointed steadily north, unwavering, despite all the magnetic interference of the modern building. Now I build, he said. Not just buildings, but opportunities. The Sheikh's offer includes funding for a program to identify and develop talent from unexpected places. Janitors, security guards, anyone with vision, but without opportunity. Amara, who'd been coordinating with Sarah Chen, rejoined them. The video's already got 2 million views. Vertex's stock is crashing. Wesley's being investigated for securities fraud. Turns out he'd been falsifying safety approvals for years. What about you? Darien asked her. What's next? The Sheikh offered me a position too. Senior architect on your team if you'll have me. Partners? Darien said, extending his hand. Equal partners. They shook on it, and in that moment, Darien felt something shift. Not just in his life, but in the industry itself. The old guard was crumbling, and something new was being built on foundations of merit rather than privilege. The twist that completed this part of the story came in the form of a FedEx delivery that arrived just as Darien was preparing to leave Vertex for the last time. The package was addressed to him properly as Darien Taylor Architect. Inside was a set of antique drafting tools and a note. Your grandfather would be proud. These were his left in my care until you were ready. You're ready now. Professor Williams, MIT. Darien remembered Professor Williams, who'd tried to help him stay in school when his mother got sick. The man had kept faith for 8 years that Darien would find his way back to architecture. The foundation was always there, Darien murmured, running his fingers over the beautiful old tools. It just took some pressure to reveal it. As the sun set over the city, painting the glass towers in shades of gold and amber, Darien Taylor walked out of Vertex Architecture's front door, not as a fired janitor, but as the lead architect of what would become one of the most important projects of the decade. Behind him, the building that had been his prison and his university stood empty of meaning. Its power structure collapsed like a building with a faulty foundation. The invisible had become visible. The silent had spoken. And the architecture of power itself had been redesigned. The elevator descended through Vertex's glass spine one final time, carrying Darien Taylor and the antique drafting tools that had waited 8 years for this moment. But as the doors opened to the lobby, he found it transformed into something resembling a war zone of modern media. Reporters pushed against security barriers, cameras flashed like artillery fire, and at the center of it all stood Wesley Harrington, his expensive suit disheveled, speaking to a cluster of microphones with the desperate energy of a drowning man, claiming the water was his idea. This is a coordinated attack on Vertex architecture. Wesley was saying, his voice carrying that particular pitch of authority, trying to reassert itself after complete collapse. We've been developing talent from all backgrounds for years. Mr. Taylor was part of our innovative apprenticeship program. That's a lie. Darien said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade through silk. Every camera swung toward him, and the lobby fell silent, except for the mechanical whisper of recording equipment. Wesley's eyes locked onto his, containing enough hatred to melt steel. Mr. Taylor was a valued member of our team who's confused about his role. My role was janitor. For 3 years I cleaned your toilets while you ignored innovations that could save lives. And 2 days ago you made me bleed on this very floor for trying to prevent a catastrophe. Darien held up his bandaged hand and the cameras zoomed in hungrily. This isn't confusion, Mr. Harrington. This is clarity. Sarah Chen pushed through the crowd, her microphone extended like a sword. Mr. Taylor, can you respond to allegations that you stole proprietary designs from Vertex? I can do better than respond, Darien said, pulling out his phone. I can prove the opposite. What followed was a masterclass in corporate destruction through simple truth. Darien had forwarded himself every email from the past 3 days, including Xavier's payment for the consultation, Wesley's termination notice, and most damningly, a voice recording Ahmad Hassan had sent him of Xavier admitting to the senior partners that he didn't understand the mathematics behind his design. "Play it!" someone shouted from the crowd. And Darien did, connecting his phone to a portable speaker Marcus had helpfully provided. Xavier's voice filled the lobby. "I don't know how the Cascade system actually works okay, but the Sheikh doesn't need to know that. We just need to sell it long enough to get the contract signed." The mini-climax erupted as Wesley lunged forward trying to grab Darien's phone, but this time Darien was ready. He stepped aside with an architect's precision, and Wesley stumbled into the arms of security guards who were no longer sure whose orders to follow. "The truth has a way of supporting itself," Darien said calmly, addressing the cameras. "Unlike buildings with faulty foundations, or companies built on stolen talent." The crowd parted as Ahmad Hassan entered the lobby, followed by two men in expensive suits who radiated legal authority like uranium-radiated energy. "Mr. Harrington," Ahmad said pleasantly, "these gentlemen are from Kirkland & Associates. They represent the Sheikh's interests in this matter. We'll be conducting a full audit of Vertex's projects over the past decade looking for other instances of misattributed innovation." Wesley's lawyer, who'd been hovering at the edges like a nervous moth, finally spoke up. "You have no authority to—" "Actually, we do," one of the Sheikh's lawyers interrupted. "The preliminary contract Vertex signed last month includes a comprehensive ethics clause. Misrepresentation of design credits triggers immediate audit rights and potential clawback of all preliminary payments." The number he mentioned made several reporters gasp. Vertex wasn't just facing embarrassment, it was facing extinction. But the real twist came from an unexpected source. An elderly black man entered the lobby moving slowly but with unmistakable dignity. He wore a simple suit that had seen better decades and carried a worn leather portfolio that looked like it had traveled through history. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying the soft authority of age. "I'm looking for Darien Taylor." Darien turned, and his legs nearly gave out. "Mr. Freeman." Thomas Freeman had been his grandfather's friend, another architect from the era when black designers built churches and community centers without credit, without recognition, but with a fierce pride in their hidden contributions. Darien hadn't seen him since his grandfather's funeral 8 years ago. "Boy, your grandfather would be spinning in his grave if he knew you'd waited this long to stand up," Mr. Freeman said, but his eyes were warm with approval. "I brought something you need to see." He opened the portfolio, revealing yellowed blueprints that made Ahmad Hassan step closer with professional interest. They were designs for a building that had never been built, a community center that would have revolutionized low-income housing in the 1970s. "Your grandfather designed this?" Mr. Freeman said loudly enough for the cameras to catch. "Wesley Harrington's father stole it, built his company on a modified version of these innovations. The Harrington Empire was built on your family's genius, boy. Time to reclaim more than just one building." The lobby erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Wesley's face went from purple to white, and somewhere in the chaos, a notification popped up on every phone simultaneously. The real architect had become the #1 trending topic globally. Darien took the blueprints with shaking hands. He could see his grandfather's signature techniques, the same mathematical elegance he'd unconsciously absorbed and applied to the Dubai Tower. Genius, apparently, was genetic. But so was the struggle for recognition. "This is ancient history," Wesley stammered. "You can't prove." "Actually," Mr. Freeman smiled, pulling out a notarized document. "I can. Your father signed this agreement in 1973, acknowledging the source of the designs, but classifying it as consultation. He paid my friend here's grandfather $500 for innovations that built a $50 million company." The cameras captured Wesley's complete dissolution. His empire hadn't just failed. It had been revealed as built on foundations of theft going back generations. The poetry of it wasn't lost on anyone. A company that stole from janitors had been built on ideas stolen from the grandfathers of janitors. Amara appeared at Darien's elbow, her phone showing a stream of numbers. Vertex stock is in free fall. Trading's been halted. The board is calling an emergency meeting. Good, Darien said, but his attention was on Mr. Freeman. Why didn't you come forward before? Wasn't my story to tell until you were ready to hear it. Your grandfather made me promise to wait until you found your own voice. Took you longer than he expected, but then again, the world got harder while we weren't looking. The Sheikh's lawyers were already on their phones speaking in rapid Arabic, mixed with legal English. Ahmad approached Darien with an expression of deep satisfaction. The Sheikh wants to expand his offer, he said. Not just the Dubai Tower. He wants to fund an entire institute dedicated to finding and developing hidden architectural talent. He wants you to run it. I don't know how to run an institute. You didn't know how to save an $80 million project either until you did it. Through the lobby's windows, Darien could see news vans arriving like antibodies responding to an infection. The story was spreading beyond architecture, beyond business, becoming something larger, a parable about talent recognition and the cost of making invisible people visible. Xavier appeared from nowhere, looking like he'd aged a decade in the past hour. His perfect hair was disheveled. His Armani suit wrinkled his eyes, holding the hollow look of someone whose entire identity had evaporated. Darien, he started, then stopped, apparently unsure how to address someone he'd stepped on for 3 years, who now stood above him. I need to say something. The cameras swiveled toward this new drama, but Darien raised his hand. Not here. Not for them. He led Xavier to a quiet corner away from the media feeding frenzy. Up close, the man looked broken in a way that went beyond career destruction. I'm a fraud, Xavier said quietly. Not just with your designs. Everything. I haven't had an original idea in 5 years. I've been stealing from interns, consultants, even my own wife, who's a better architect than I'll ever be. Why are you telling me this? Because you did something I never could. You stood up. You risked everything for truth. Xavier pulled out an envelope. This is every document showing your contributions to Vertex projects over the past 3 years. Things you probably don't even know got implemented. Your cleaning routine gave you access to problems, and you left solutions in margins, in trash cans, in places you thought no one would notice. But I noticed. I stole them all. The envelope was thick-heavy, with 3 years of invisible contributions. Darien opened it to find project after project, bearing traces of his midnight thoughts, his grandfather's techniques, his solutions to problems he'd never been asked to solve. This is evidence of systematic intellectual property theft, Darien said. Yes, use it. Bury Wesley. Bury the whole culture that made this possible. Maybe something better can be built on the ruins. It was the closest thing to redemption Xavier could offer, voluntary destruction of his own reputation, to ensure the system that created him couldn't create more like him. The mini-climax built as Darien returned to the main lobby to find it transformed into an impromptu tribunal. The board of directors had arrived, their faces grim as they surveyed the media circus. The chairman, Robert Steinberg, ironically from the competing firm that would have gotten the Dubai contract if Vertex had failed, approached Wesley with the expression of someone approaching hazardous waste. Wesley, the board has voted. You're terminated effective immediately. All contracts void, all severance canceled pending investigation of fraud charges. You can't. I built this company. Your father built this company. Mr. Freeman interjected, still standing strong despite his age. On my friend's designs. You just inherited theft and made it a business model. The board members looked at the old blueprints, at the evidence mounting on every phone screen, at the cameras recording their every expression. The calculation was obvious: distance themselves from Wesley or be pulled down with him. Mr. Taylor, Steinberg addressed Darien formally. The board would like to offer you Wesley's position. The lobby went silent. Everyone waited for Darien's response to this ultimate reversal from janitor to CEO in 3 days. "No," Darien said simply. "Vertex is diseased from the foundation up. You can't fix that by changing the nameplate on the corner office. Besides, I have buildings to design and talent to find. Real work, not corporate theater." He turned to address the cameras directly. "But I will offer this any Vertex employee who's had their work stolen, their contributions ignored, their talents wasted. The Sheikh's new institute will have positions for you. We're going to build something new, something that values brilliance wherever it comes from." The twist that no one saw coming arrived in the form of a government official pushing through the crowd. She wore the kind of understated suit that suggested serious federal authority and carried a folder marked with official seals. "Mr. Harrington, Mr. Chambers," she announced, "I'm from the Securities and Exchange Commission. We need to discuss irregularities in Vertex's public filings regarding the attribution of intellectual property." Wesley's lawyer stepped forward. "My client will cooperate fully." "Your client is under arrest," she interrupted as FBI agents materialized from the crowd like sharks from dark water. "Fraud, securities violations, and conspiracy to suppress whistleblower complaints." As Wesley was led away in handcuffs, the final destruction of a man who'd had everything and recognized nothing, Darien felt a strange emptiness. This wasn't triumph, it was just ending. The real work would come next. His phone buzzed with a message from his sister Keisha. "Proud of you, big brother." Mom's crying happy tears. "Granddad would be so proud." Then another from his mother. "Baby Channel 7 just called. They want to do a documentary. Should I tell them about all those nights you stayed up drawing by candlelight?" And another from a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Taylor, I'm a janitor at Goldman Sachs. I have a PhD in economics from Nigeria, but can't get anyone to look at my analysis. Your story gives me hope. Can we talk?" They kept coming, message after message from invisible talents around the world, people who cleaned offices and secured buildings and maintained the infrastructure that let others take credit for brilliance. Each one a potential revolution waiting for permission to begin. Sarah Chen approached with her camera crew. "Mr. Taylor, one question for our viewers, what's next?" Darien looked around the lobby at the shattered remains of Wesley's empire, at the board members scrambling for damage control, at Xavier, sitting alone on a bench like a ghost of ambition. Then he looked at Amara, who nodded with shared understanding, at Ahmed, who smiled with anticipation, at Mr. Freeman, who carried 7 decades of patience in his eyes. "What's next is, we stop making people invisible," Darien said. "We stop pretending that talent comes with a particular accent or education or uniform. We build something where the person cleaning the floors might also be the person who saves the building. And the Dubai Tower will be built correctly with credit where it's due. My name will be on those plans, but so will every person who contributes, from the engineers to the construction workers. Architecture isn't about ego. It's about creating spaces where people can thrive." The afternoon sun had burned through the morning's fog, flooding the lobby with light that made everything look like it was made of gold. But Darien knew better. Real gold was in the minds of people like the Nigerian economist Janitor, like his grandfather, who designed in shadow, like all the invisible talents waiting for their moment. As he prepared to leave Vertex for the last time, Marcus stopped him at the door. "D, before you go, there's something you should know. I've been taking night classes in structural engineering. Watching you these past 3 years, seeing how you studied those plans, it inspired me." "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Marcus shrugged. "Same reason you pushed that mop for 3 years. Sometimes you got to wait for the right moment to be seen." "Well, the Institute is going to need security consultants who understand architecture. Interested?" Marcus grinned. "Thought you'd never ask." The exit from Vertex felt like emerging from underwater. The city air, even with its pollution and noise, tasted like freedom. Darien stood on the sidewalk holding his grandfather's drafting tools, and Mr. Freeman's blueprints feeling the weight of generations of suppressed talent demanding expression. A small crowd had gathered beyond the media perimeter maintenance workers, security guards, food service employees from nearby buildings. They weren't cheering or holding signs. They were just standing witness to one of their own breaking through. One of them, a middle-aged Latina woman in a cleaning company uniform, approached tentatively. "Mr. Taylor, my daughter, she draws buildings all the time, but we can't afford architecture school." "Have her send me her drawings," Darien said, handing her Ahmad's business card. "The Institute will have scholarships. Full rides for anyone with talent and drive." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand what this means. To be seen, to have our children seen." But Darien did understand. He'd spent 3 years invisible, and before that, a lifetime watching his grandfather's genius go uncredited. The pain of invisibility was generational, institutional, systemic. But so was the potential for change. Amara joined him on the sidewalk carrying her own box of possessions from her cleared desk. "So partner, where do we start?" "With the truth," Darien said, looking up at Vertex's glass tower one last time. "We tell the truth about every building, every design, every innovation. We make the invisible visible." "That's going to make a lot of enemies." "Good. Architecture needs better enemies than gravity and weather." They walked away from Vertex together, leaving behind the wreckage of an empire built on stolen dreams. Behind them, news crews continued their feeding frenzy. The board continued their damage control, and Xavier sat alone with the weight of his confessions. But ahead lay something unprecedented, an architectural institute funded by Middle Eastern billions, and founded on American dreams dedicated to finding genius wherever it hid. The Dubai Tower would be its first statement, but not its last. As they reached the corner, Darien's phone rang. It was Professor Williams from MIT. "Darien, I've been watching the news. The department would like to offer you an honorary doctorate, considering your work on the Dubai project demonstrates mastery beyond what we could teach." "I appreciate that, Professor, but I'd rather earn it. Can I re-enroll to finish my last year?" There was surprised silence, then warm laughter. "That might be the first time someone's turned down an honorary doctorate to do the actual work." "Yes, of course. Full scholarship naturally." "Not just for me. I want to bring 5 students from non-traditional backgrounds. Full rides for all of them." "Done. Anything else?" "Yes. I want to teach a course. Architecture from the ground up, innovation from unexpected places." "I think that can be arranged." As Darien ended the call, he found Mr. Freeman waiting by a car holding one more surprise, a photograph he hadn't seen before. It showed his grandfather and Mr. Freeman as young men, standing before a building Darien recognized as the first Harrington office, holding blueprints that would build an empire they'd never be part of. "We waited 70 years for this moment," Mr. Freeman said. "Your grandfather always said the foundation would crack, eventually show what was really underneath. He just didn't know his grandson would be the one to reveal it." "I wish he could see this." "Boy, where do you think you got the courage? He's been with you every step, in every line you drew, every problem you solved. The dead don't leave us. They just become the foundation we build on." The car pulled up, a Sheikh's car, naturally black and gleaming, and worth more than Darien had made in 3 years of janitorial work. Ahmad gestured from inside. "We have a meeting with the Dubai construction team in an hour. They're eager to meet the real architect." Darien looked back one more time at the scene he was leaving: the media circus, the collapsing company, the visible ruins of invisible oppression. Then he got in the car, setting his grandfather's tools carefully beside him. "Tell them the real architect is actually architects plural. Every person who contributes truth to the building of something is its architect." As they drove through the city, Darien watched the buildings pass, each one a story of who got credit and who got forgotten, who stood in the light and who worked in shadow. But shadows were shifting now, light finding new angles, illuminating corners that had been dark for generations. The mini-climax of this resolution came when they passed a construction site where workers had stopped to watch the news on their phones. One of them recognized the car, recognized Darien through the window, and did something unexpected. He saluted, not mockingly, not ironically, but with genuine respect from one builder to another. Then others joined him, a dozen hard-hatted workers, acknowledging what Darien represented, the possibility that talent could transcend title, that recognition could find anyone, that the hierarchy of worth was not written in stone, but in sand, ready to be redrawn. The moment passed quickly, the car moving on, but Darien carried it with him like his grandfather's compass, a true north pointing toward a world where architects might start as janitors, where innovation might come from anywhere, where buildings might be honest about their foundations. The sun was setting now, painting the city in colors that made even concrete look beautiful. Somewhere in this maze of steel and glass, other Darien Taylors were pushing mops and solving problems waiting for their moment, or making it themselves. The revolution hadn't ended with Wesley's arrest or Vertex's collapse. It had just begun, one true attribution at a time, one recognized talent at a time, one honest foundation at a time. Tomorrow, Darien would start designing the Dubai Tower, officially his name finally attached to his work. But tonight, he had one more task. He pulled out his phone and created a new social media account, @InvisibleArchitects. His first post was simple. Every building has hidden designers. Every innovation has an unrecognized source. Share your story. It's time to be seen. Within minutes, responses poured in from around the world. Security guards with engineering degrees, cleaning staff, with artistic vision maintenance workers, with revolutionary ideas. Each story a thread in a tapestry of suppressed talent that had always existed but never been acknowledged. The car stopped at a red light, and Darien saw his reflection in the window, no longer a janitor, not quite a CEO, but something more valuable, a bridge between worlds, a translator of invisible brilliance into visible reality. The light turned green, and they moved forward into a future that would be built on truth, rather than theft on talent, rather than title on foundations that acknowledged every hand that laid them. The Dubai construction team meeting was supposed to start in 10 minutes, but the conference room at the Ritz-Carlton was already electric with tension. Engineers who'd built impossible structures in desert sand sat nervously adjusting their tablets, waiting to meet the janitor who'd solved what they couldn't. Darien stood in the bathroom staring at his reflection, while Ahmad's words echoed from the other side of the door. "They're skeptical," Ahmad was saying. "A few are insulted. The lead engineer, Friedrich Brennan, has been designing megastructures for 30 years. He's particularly vocal about meeting someone with, quote, no legitimate credentials." Darien adjusted the new suit Ahmad had insisted on buying, not borrowed this time, but tailored specifically for him. It felt different from the disguise he'd worn 2 days ago. This one felt like armor he'd earned. "Let them be skeptical," Darien replied, opening the door. "Skepticism is just the first stage of recognition." The conference room fell silent when he entered. 15 faces turned toward him, with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. Friedrich Brennan, a mountain of a man with silver hair and hands that looked like they could bend steel, didn't stand when Darien approached. "So," Brennan said in accented English that carried the weight of German engineering precision, "you're the janitor who thinks he can build in Dubai sand." "I'm the architect who knows how to build in Dubai sand," Darien corrected, setting his grandfather's drafting tools on the table with deliberate ceremony. "The janitor was just my day job," someone snorted dismissively. A younger engineer, probably fresh from some European technical institute, pulled up a tablet showing Darien's calculations. "These cascade system equations, they're undergraduate level at best. Any first-year student could..." "Could what?" Darien interrupted. "Could recognize that the standard approaches would fail, could innovate a solution that costs 15% less while being 3 times as stable, could see what 30 years of expertise missed." He pulled out a marker, and went to the whiteboard, not asking permission, just taking the space like he'd always belonged there. His hand moved with practiced precision equations, flowing like water finding its course. "The problem with expertise," he said while drawing, "is that it creates blindness. You've all been trained to think about sand as a problem to overcome. I think about it as a partner to work with." "That's poetic nonsense," Brennan growled. "Is it?" Darien turned from the board marker still in hand. "Mr. Brennan, you designed the Burj Khalifa's foundation system correct, revolutionary for its time. But you fought the sand-created massive friction piles to resist it. What I'm proposing is harmony instead of resistance." He returned to the board, sketching a cross-section that made several engineers lean forward despite themselves. "The cascade system doesn't just distribute weight, it responds to microscopic sand movement, like a musical instrument responds to breath. The building doesn't stand on the desert, it dances with it." "Dancing buildings." The young engineer laughed. "This is what happens when you let janitors—" The marker hit the table with a crack that silenced the room. Darien's patience, 3 years of stored silence, finally found its limit. "Finish that sentence," he said quietly. "Please, tell me what happens when you let janitors think, when you let security guards innovate, when you let the people who actually maintain your monuments contribute to their design." The young engineer's face flushed, but he stayed silent. "I'll tell you what happens," Darien continued. "You get solutions that work because they come from people who understand failure intimately. Every night for 3 years, I cleaned up after your mistakes. Broken models, discarded plans, the debris of ego-driven design that forgot its purpose. I've seen more structural failures in trash cans than most engineers see in careers." Ahmad cleared his throat diplomatically. "Perhaps we could review the specific technical innovations." "No," Brennan interrupted, standing slowly. His massive frame cast shadows across the blueprints. "Let him speak. I want to hear this." It wasn't mockery in his voice anymore, but genuine interest. The mini-climax built as Darien recognized the shift from skepticism to consideration, the moment when expertise recognizes truth regardless of its source. "Every building fails," Darien said, meeting Brennan's eyes. "The question is how it fails. Catastrophically killing hundreds, or gradually telegraphing its needs, asking for help. The cascade system includes failure as a design element. Each structural point can fail independently without triggering systematic collapse. The building becomes self-diagnosing." "Show me," Brennan demanded. For the next hour, Darien did more than show, he taught. His hands moved across blueprints and tablets through calculations and simulations, demonstrating not just what, but why. The room's energy shifted from skepticism to engagement as engineers began asking real questions, challenging assumptions, building on ideas. "This is impossible," someone said, but they were smiling. "The cost savings alone, the safety improvements, the application to other projects." Brennan held up a massive hand for silence. "Mr. Taylor, I owe you an apology. I've been designing for 3 decades, and in 1 hour you've shown me innovations I should have seen myself. The question is, will you let us build it?" "It's not mine to let or prevent," Darien replied. "But I have conditions." Ahmad leaned forward. "The Sheikh has already agreed to your terms. I have new ones." Darien pulled out his phone, showing the flood of messages to @Invisible Architects. "For every major position on this project, I want you to consider one non-traditional candidate. Someone whose resume doesn't look right, but whose mind works perfectly. Give me 1 slot per department to fill with invisible talent." "That's insane," the young engineer protested. "We can't risk an $80 million project on unqualified." "I was unqualified yesterday," Darien interrupted. "Today I'm lead architect. Qualification is just permission to be seen. I'm asking you to look harder." The twist arrived in the form of a news alert on everyone's phones simultaneously. Sarah Chen was broadcasting live from outside a federal courthouse where Wesley Harrington was being arraigned. But the real story wasn't his arrest. It was what investigators had found in Vertex's records. Breaking news in the Vertex scandal, Sarah reported. FBI investigators have uncovered what they're calling a shadow library of innovations, over 200 patented designs that originated from maintenance staff, security personnel, and other support workers over the past 2 decades. The intellectual property theft is estimated in the billions. The conference room erupted. Everyone was talking at once, checking their phones, looking at Darien with new understanding. He wasn't an anomaly. He was the visible tip of an invisible iceberg. Ahmad's phone rang. He listened briefly, then handed it to Darien. "It's the Sheikh." Sheikh al-Rashid's voice carried the authority of someone who'd reshaped deserts into cities. "Mr. Taylor, I'm watching the news from my plane. This changes everything." "How so?" "I want to expand our partnership. Not one institute, 10. One in every major city where I have interests. Each one dedicated to finding and developing talent that's been overlooked. But I need someone to lead this initiative, someone who understands both worlds." "I'm an architect, not an administrator." "You're a bridge," the Sheikh corrected. "Between the visible and invisible, the recognized and overlooked. That's rarer than any technical skill." Darien looked around the conference room at engineers who were reassessing everything they thought they knew about where innovation came from. Brennan was studying the blueprints with the intensity of someone discovering a new language. "I'll do it on one condition," Darien said. "The first building each institute creates must be in the community it serves. Not a showpiece for rich clients, but something useful for the people who've been invisible." "Agreed. We'll discuss details when I land tomorrow. For now, convince those engineers that revolution can be built as solidly as tradition." The call ended, and Darien found everyone staring at him. The young engineer, who'd been most dismissive, was now pulling up something on his tablet. "This cascade system," he said slowly. "Could it work for earthquake zones? Because I've been struggling with a project in Japan." And just like that, the room transformed from a skeptical review to a collaborative workshop. Ideas flew across the table, building on Darien's innovation, extending it, improving it. Brennan contributed insights from 30 years of experience that made Darien's system even more elegant. "You know what this really is?" Brennan said suddenly, his eyes bright with realization. "It's biomimicry. The cascade system works like a root network, each part supporting the others while maintaining independence." "My grandfather grew up on a farm," Darien said quietly. "He always said buildings should learn from trees, flexible enough to bend, strong enough to stand, wise enough to know the difference." The mini-climax erupted when the young engineer whose name Darien learned was Marcus Webb pulled up a simulation on the main screen. "Look at this. If we apply Mr. Taylor's principles to the entire Dubai skyline, not just one building, we could create a mutually supporting network. Buildings that actually help each other stand." "That's..." Brennan paused, calculating rapidly. "That's revolutionary. It would change how we think about urban construction entirely." "Then let's change it," Darien said. "But let's make sure the change includes everyone who contributes, not just everyone with the right degrees." The meeting continued past midnight, room service trays accumulating as the engineers worked with the fever of discovery. Darien's phone buzzed constantly, messages from his mother, from Keisha, from hundreds of invisible architects around the world sharing their stories. One message stopped him cold. It was from Xavier Chambers. "Watching you on the news. You asked why I never created anything original. Truth is, I was terrified. Terrified of being wrong, of being laughed at, of not being perfect. So I stole instead. It felt safer. You were never afraid to be wrong, were you? That's why you could innovate from a janitor's closet. Fear makes us all invisible, just in different ways." Darien showed the message to Amara, who'd been coordinating with the Sheikh's team on the institute planning. "He's right about one thing," she said. "Fear does make us invisible. But you know what makes us visible?" "What?" "Necessity. You became visible because the building would have fallen without you. The truth needed to be told." At 2 a.m., Brennan finally called an end to the session. Mr. Taylor Darien, we'll build your vision. Every beam, every joint, every innovation. But I have one request. What's that? Teach me. Not just the technical aspects, but how to see what I've been trained to overlook. I've spent 30 years building on sand. You've spent 3 years building on something more fundamental truth. As the engineers filed out energized, despite the hour, Ahmad pulled Darien aside. There's something else. The government wants to review all federal building projects for similar intellectual property theft. You've started something that goes beyond architecture. Good. Every industry has invisible innovators. Maybe it's time they all became visible. The twist that changed everything came at dawn. Darien was finally in his hotel room, exhausted but unable to sleep when the news broke. Wesley Harrington, facing life in prison for fraud, had made a deal. He would testify about industry-wide practices of stealing innovations from support staff in exchange for a reduced sentence. But what he revealed went deeper than anyone expected. There was an entire shadow economy of stolen brilliance, a systematic harvesting of ideas from those deemed too unimportant to credit. Janitors, security guards, food service workers, maintenance staff, all of them contributing innovations that built fortunes they never shared. Sarah Chen was interviewing Wesley from federal custody, and even through the screen, Darien could see the man was broken. Not just his empire, but his entire worldview had collapsed. It was standard practice, Wesley was saying, his voice hollow. We all did it. Every major firm. We'd even trade stolen innovations between companies like baseball cards. I'll give you the janitor's HVAC solution for your security guard surveillance algorithm. Did you ever consider that these people deserved credit payment? Wesley looked directly at the camera, and for a moment, Darien saw something almost like awareness in his eyes. They weren't people to us. They were furniture that occasionally had useful ideas. The interview cut to Sarah's analysis, but Darien had seen enough. He picked up his grandfather's compass, feeling its weight, its history, its patient persistence through decades of invisibility. His phone rang. It was his mother. Baby, are you watching? I'm watching, Mom. Your grandfather would be so proud. Not just that you're getting recognition, but that you're making sure others get it too. Mom, I need to ask you something. Was Granddad angry about all those stolen years, all that uncredited work? She was quiet for a moment. He was disappointed, not angry. He used to say anger was just another way of being invisible. It consumed you from inside while the world went on not seeing. But disappointment. That was fuel. That was something you could build with. After the call, Darien stood at his hotel window, watching the sun rise over the city. In 12 hours, he'd meet the Sheikh in person. In 24 hours, ground would break on the Dubai Tower with his name on the blueprints. In a week, the first Invisible Architects Institute would open its doors. But the real change was happening right now in 1,000 offices where maintenance staff were being looked at differently, where security guards were being asked for their opinions, where the invisible were becoming uncomfortably visible to those who'd profited from their transparency. Amara knocked and entered with coffee and a tablet showing the latest news. You need to see this. The screen showed a live feed from MIT where hundreds of students were protesting, demanding the university review all patents and papers for proper attribution. Similar protests were erupting at technical schools worldwide. You've started a revolution, Amara said. No, Darien corrected. The revolution was always there in every overlooked innovation, every stolen idea, every invisible architect. I just made it visible. The mini-climax hit when Brennan called with urgency in his voice. Darien, we have a problem. The Dubai government wants to fast-track the project. They want to break ground tomorrow. That's impossible. We haven't finished the reviews. They don't care. This has become political. The Sheikh's rivals are claiming the whole thing is a publicity stunt, that a janitor couldn't possibly design something this complex. They want to call the bluff. Darien felt the familiar weight of being tested, of having to prove himself again and again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Then we call their bluff, he said. Get every engineer on that team. We're going to do a complete review in 18 hours. And Brennan, remember those non-traditional candidates I mentioned? I'm calling them in now. You want to stake an $80 million project on untested talent. I want to stake it on invisible talent. There's a difference. Send me your biggest technical challenges. Let's see what furniture with ideas can do. The next 18 hours became legend in architectural circles. Darien assembled a team that no traditional firm would have considered a taxi driver, with a PhD in physics who'd fled Syria, a house cleaner who'd been sketching structural improvements for 20 years, a food truck owner who'd solved complex ventilation problems to keep his kitchen cool in summer heat. Each brought perspectives that formal training would have educated out of them. The taxi driver saw traffic flow patterns that informed emergency evacuation routes. The house cleaner understood maintenance needs that most architects ignored until buildings failed. The food truck owner's ventilation solution could reduce cooling costs by 30%. "This is insane," Marcus Webb kept saying, but he was grinning as he said it, working alongside people who challenged every assumption he'd been taught. Brennan moved through the chaos like a conductor translating between formal engineering and innovation, bridging worlds with growing excitement. Darien, this house cleaner's idea about modular cleaning systems, it could save millions in maintenance. "Then put her name on the patent," Darien replied. "Every innovation gets attributed." As dawn approached on the day of groundbreaking, they had something extraordinary, not just a building design, but a new way of building incorporating insights from every level of the hierarchy that most firms pretended didn't exist. The groundbreaking ceremony was scheduled for noon. The Sheikh had arrived along with Dubai officials, international media, and protesters, both supporting and opposing the idea of a janitor-designed skyscraper. But the real twist came an hour before the ceremony. The young Sheikh's rival Prince Mahmoud arrived with his own team of engineers and a challenge. "I'll make you a wager," he announced to the assembled media. "If this janitor's design can pass my team's review in 1 hour, I'll double the investment. If it fails, the project dies here." The Sheikh looked at Darien, question in his eyes. This was beyond business. Now it was about validating an entire worldview. "Accept it," Darien said. "But I have a condition. My team presents not just me." And so in front of international media, a Syrian taxi driver explained traffic flow, a house cleaner detailed maintenance innovations, a food truck owner demonstrated ventilation systems. Each person who'd been invisible stood in the spotlight explaining their contribution to what would become one of the most innovative buildings of the decade. Prince Mahmoud's engineers asked harder and harder questions, but every answer came not from traditional expertise, but from lived experience, translated into engineering solutions. The climax arrived when the lead engineer, frustrated, asked, "How can we trust construction to people without proper credentials?" Darien stepped forward. "The same way you trust buildings to stand on foundations you never see. The credentials aren't what hold the building up, the physics is. And physics doesn't care about your degree, only about truth." He pulled out his grandfather's compass, its brass surface catching the light. This belonged to a man who designed buildings that still stand, churches and community centers that survived hurricanes and time, though his name appears on none of them. He had no credentials except understanding, no recognition except results. The room was silent. Prince Mahmoud's engineer looked at his tablet at the calculations that couldn't be disputed, at innovations that shouldn't exist but did. "It will work," he said quietly. "God help me, this janitor's building will work better than anything we've designed." Prince Mahmoud stood slowly, his face unreadable. Then he did something no one expected. He laughed. Rich, genuine laughter that filled the space. "Double the investment," he told the Sheikh. "No, triple it. If we're going to build the future, let's build it with everyone, not just everyone who looks the part." The groundbreaking ceremony became something more than symbolic. As Darien pushed the ceremonial shovel into Dubai sand, he thought about his grandfather, About 3 years of pushing a mop about every invisible architect whose ideas built worlds they'd never be welcomed into. But that was changing. The sand shifted, accepting the shovel, ready to accept the foundation of something unprecedented, not just a building, but a new way of building. Sarah Chen pushed through the crowd with her microphone. "Mr. Taylor, you've gone from janitor to lead architect of a multi-billion-dollar project in less than a week. What's next?" Darien looked at his team, Brennan, and the traditional engineers, standing beside taxi drivers and house cleaners, all equal contributors to innovation. He looked at Ahmad and the Sheikh, who'd risked reputation on invisible talent. He looked at Amara, who'd stood by him when standing meant falling. "What's next is we build," he said. "We build with everyone who has something to contribute. We build with truth instead of theft, with recognition instead of invisibility. We build a world where the person cleaning the floors might also be the person who saves your life with an innovation you never knew you needed." His phone buzzed with a message from his sister. "Watching you on TV in my engineering class. My professor is redesigning his entire curriculum. You didn't just change architecture, big brother. You changed everything." As the ceremony concluded and construction began, Darien stood watching bulldozers move earth according to his design, his grandfather's techniques, his invisible years made visible. The foundation was being laid not just for a building, but for a different future. The final twist came that evening. Darien was reviewing plans in his hotel room when a knock interrupted. He opened the door to find an elderly woman, well-dressed but trembling. "Mr. Taylor, I'm Margaret Harrington, Wesley's mother." Darien's first instinct was to close the door, but something in her eyes stopped him. "I came to apologize," she said, "and to give you this." She handed him a leather journal, aged and worn. Inside, in handwriting he recognized from the historical blueprints, were his grandfather's original designs. "My father-in-law stole these," she said simply. "I've known for 40 years. I've been too cowardly to do anything about it. But watching you this week, seeing what courage looks like, I couldn't stay silent anymore." The journal contained not just blueprints, but philosophy, thoughts on architecture as justice building, as community design, as recognition of human dignity. It was his grandfather's true voice, preserved in secret, waiting for someone brave enough to speak it aloud. "Wesley doesn't know I'm here," she continued. "He wouldn't understand. He inherited theft so naturally he thought it was business. But you've shown that inheritance can be disrupted, that patterns can be broken." After she left, Darien sat with his grandfather's journal, reading words written before he was born, but meant somehow for this moment. "They will try to make you invisible. They will succeed for a time. But truth has a way of rising like heat through a building, finding every crack, every weakness until it emerges into light. Be patient. Be persistent. Build even when no one sees you building. Someone someday will need what you've created in shadow." The words blurred as tears came, 3 years of suppressed emotion finally finding release. He'd done it. Not just for himself, but for his grandfather, for every invisible architect whose blueprint built someone else's fortune. His phone lit up with messages from around the world. The Instagram page @InvisibleArchitects had reached 1 million followers. Stories poured in innovations in hospitals created by orderlies, algorithms designed by night watchmen, solutions to urban problems developed by the people who lived them rather than studied them. Each story was a brick in a new foundation, a different way of building society itself. The Dubai Tower would rise, but it would rise on something more fundamental than sand or concrete. It would rise on recognition, on truth finally told, on the revolutionary idea that brilliance could come from anywhere if you were willing to see it. As midnight approached, Darien stood on his hotel balcony, looking out at a city built on ambition and oil, on dreams and exploitation. Tomorrow he would return to MIT to finish his degree while managing a revolution. The day after, he would review applications for the Invisible Architects Institute, looking for brilliance in resumes that didn't shine. But tonight he simply stood holding his grandfather's compass, feeling its weight transform from burden to blessing. The needle pointed steadily north toward truth, toward justice, toward a future where no one had to choose between survival and recognition. The news played on the television behind him. Sarah Chen, reporting on the global impact of what she called the janitor revolution. Companies were scrambling to review their practices. Universities were reconsidering admissions. The entire architecture of how society recognized talent was being redesigned. Breaking news, Sarah announced. The president has announced a federal review of all government contracts to ensure proper attribution of innovations. The executive order will be known as the Taylor Protocol, named after Darien Taylor, the janitor who became an architect and changed how we see genius itself. Darien turned off the television. He didn't need to watch anymore. He was living it. The final moment came in a phone call from Marcus, the security guard. "D, you're not going to believe this. They're offering me a position. Real security consulting for the Dubai project. They want my input on structural vulnerabilities from a ground-level perspective." "You deserve it, Marcus." "We all deserved it. You just made them see it." "Hey, D." "Yeah. Thanks for not forgetting us when you became visible." "I couldn't forget Marcus. We're all part of the same building. Some of us are just foundations instead of penthouses." "And you know what I learned?" "What's that?" "The foundation is what holds everything up." As the call ended, Darien picked up his grandfather's drafting tools, running his fingers along worn edges that had drawn dreams in shadow for decades. Tomorrow he would use them to draw in light. But they would carry the same truth they'd always carried, that genius wasn't about recognition, but about building something worth recognizing. The city lights sparkled below each one, representing someone working late, someone cleaning offices, someone securing buildings, someone invisible, contributing something essential. The revolution wasn't just about making them visible, it was about understanding that they'd always been there holding everything up, waiting for someone to finally see the architecture of reality itself. Darien Taylor, former janitor, current architect, perpetual revolutionary, closed his eyes and felt the weight of responsibility transform into wings. He'd spent 3 years in basement shadows. Now he would spend the rest of his life making sure no one else had to choose between being seen and being essential. The building would rise, the institutes would open, the invisible would emerge, and somewhere in whatever afterlife architects inhabited his grandfather was finally properly proudly acknowledged.